Hi Taylor. To begin with, I really enjoyed watching your video. I thought you had a lot of great insight in regards to goodness and smartness, and I think you provided a lot of really solid examples of how you see those two things played out in your own setting. In response to your prompt, which was to elaborate on ability profiling is the process of responding to a student as disabled and regarding all of their actions as interactions through a lens of deficiency. This is similar to racial profiling, as assuming a person's actions or thoughts are because of their race or disability. For example, the text mentioned the situation with Trayvon Martin and being watched under close surveillance because of the color of his skin, which ultimately led to his untimely death. Ability profiling can unfortunately lead to the disablement of a child, meaning that individuals typically focus on what the child cannot do, which is a result of their disability. On the other hand, ability profiling can lead to the ablement of a child if you look at and focus on their privilege, pardon, or entitlement. I unfortunately do see ability profiling regularly within my setting. Many times, if a child does poorly on a test, teachers blame it on their disability instead of other possible contributing factors. Maybe the child didn't have enough time to study, or ample amounts of practice, or was having a rough day and could not focus on the test. Instead of focusing on the possibilities of why they underperformed, or instead of focusing on what they can do, they immediately assume they performed under standards because of their disability. I see this a lot with my students with learning disabilities because oftentimes they are not held to the same expectations as their peers, and if they are and they don't do as well after receiving accommodations, they just say, oh, well, it's because he can't read and he's not going to do well anyway because he has a learning disability. I try to remind my colleagues that, you have to look at the whole child instead of just their disability when, thinking of why they didn't do well or what kind of curriculum they should receive. I also want to touch on ability grouping that the text also mentioned. Ability grouping is placing students in hierarchically ranked teaching sets. This often generates problems for the children in lower groups as they are often denied access to the full extent of the general education curriculum. Sometimes they may be taught by less experienced teachers, and they have overall lowered expectations. As Paulette, a parent, mentioned, ability grouping and essentially ability profiling are brutalizing these children unintentionally in their education by not having the same expectations that their peers do. If children continuously hear that they're not good enough or smart enough and that they need a dumbed down curriculum, which unfortunately they wind up finding out maybe from hearing a teacher's conversation in the hallway or from hearing their peers talking, they begin to really believe that, which often results in having less motivation for school and even less motivation to do well. I also see this in my setting, especially when children get to the junior high, which at my school we call beyond the blue doors. From kindergarten to fifth grade, children are not ability grouped and they all receive the same instruction and have the same expectations as all of their peers. Once they get to junior high or beyond the blue doors, they are placed in classes based on ability, and we have a high group and a low group for both reading and math. They are not held to the same standards or expectations as their peers, and many times these children catch on to this and often get down on themselves. This results in possible negative behaviors, lowered scores because they just don't care anymore, and less positive interactions overall. I believe it is our job as educators to remind all of our students that they are intelligent and able children who can reach the same expectations as all of their peers. Many times, if I have a kid who I may have heard was ability profiled by one of their teachers, if they didn't do very good on a test, I try to have a meaningful conversation with them and talk to them about how maybe we can prepare for tests more, or I try to figure out what was going on that day to see what was wrong and to see if it was a manifestation of their disability or if in fact they just bombed the test, which does happen. The text stated that the black individuals are often overrepresented in lower groups, and many of these lower groups, as I said, have overall lowered expectations. Um, really my school is about 95% white, although as the demographics are changing, we are getting more students with different ethnic backgrounds. So I looking at the high and low groups or the ability profiling, I really don't see a huge influx in numbers in our children who come from black families or Hispanic or Latino families. But I did see an overrepresentation of black children when I was teaching in Decatur, Illinois, which my school was about 75% black, 15% Hispanic, and 10% or 5% white. Um, I think that we have to be careful if we are talking about a child's disability and their performance in school. And like I said before, we have to look at the whole child and not just their disability. Thanks.